Here in the United States, we have laws that help protect breastfeeding and pumping moms, such as the right to nurse your baby in public. But many of these laws are determined by the individual states. So what exactly are your rights? How do you learn about these laws? And why do we even need laws that determine how and when you can feed your babies? We're the Boob Group.
I use a breast pump.
I hand express milk for my baby.
I exclusively breastfeed.
I use a nipple shield.
I breastfed after a C-section.
I use a milk bank.
I breastfeed in public whenever I feel like it.
I pump at work.
I breastfeed with a cover.
I breastfeed twins.
I give my baby bottles.
I made my own supplemental nursing system.
I supplement with formula.
I talk to my baby while I breastfeed.
I'm breastfeeding as a survivor of sexual abuse.
When I have extra milk, I share it with other moms.
We are equal.
We are
the Boob Group.
Welcome to the Boob Group. We're here to support all moms wanting to provide breast milk to their babies. I'm your host, Priya Namard. I'm also the founder of the Moms Pump Here Nursery Locator app, which helps moms all over the world find great places to pump and breastfeed their babies. If you haven't yet, we encourage you to download the new Mommy Media Network app, which gives you easy access to all our episodes. You can also subscribe to our podcast through iTunes so all our latest episodes download directly to your phone. And if you're on iTunes, please leave us a review so other moms can learn about us. Let's meet the mamas joining our conversation today. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your family.
Greetings, my name is Mikhail Salaj. I'm a New York State Assembly member. I'm also a first-time mother to a 15-month-old, and I'm very proud to have him. And I'm just very excited to be here on the Boob Group. In the state of New York, we're always looking to empower women and children, and the best way to empower new families is to make sure that they breastfeed. And so I'm one of the proud sponsors of legislation that empowers breastfeeding and empowers donor breast milk.
Hi, my name's Tara Johnson, and I work for the National Conference of State Legislatures in the Maternal and Child Health Program. I am not a mother, but I have a lot of friends and family that are, so we talk about lactation support and breastfeeding quite a bit, and we're very supportive of new moms.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Sunny, and I'm producing today's show. And I got 4 kiddos. My oldest is 6, and I have 4-year-old, and then I have twins that are almost 3, next month, turning 3. And I breastfed all of them. I also pumped, and I also did a lot of the donor milk, both donating and receiving donor milk, and I also supplemented with formula as well. So I'm not currently breastfeeding. I'm actually still lactating, but I'm not. My twins are kind of over it. We're at the tail end, but they're over it.
I don't want any more.
Not really.
And I'm your host, Priya, and I'm a mama of 3. My oldest is 14. I have a 12-year-old and I have an 8-year-old. So they're a little bit older, but I breastfed all of them. My youngest I breastfed for 3 years. The other 2 were not so lucky, but they all got supplemented and, I breast pumped for all 3 of them. So they're nice, strong, and healthy kids. I think it's such an important topic, especially from my point of view as a mompreneur. And having a company that you're constantly talking with moms, I think it's so important that we're talking about breastfeeding laws today.
All right, so as you know, we're talking about breastfeeding law today, and I found a news headline that goes along with our topic. It's amazing. It's actually a video. I think everyone should go check out. But so I'm not going to try to say her name because I will totally butcher it. I can try her first name, Anur. I'm just going to say Anur. I'm not even sure if that's how you pronounce it. She is an Icelandic lawmaker, and the video is of her in Parliament. They were having a discussion in Parliament in Iceland, and they were discussing something that she needed to participate in. It was unexpected, but she happened to be breastfeeding her baby when she was sitting down, and they call her up, and it is the most natural thing.
Yeah, nobody flinched.
Nobody flinched. The video shows 2 men in the background and a female. Nobody is even thinking twice. I have no idea what she's saying because, I don't speak that language, but she is doing her job, and it just looks, her baby baby is literally breastfeeding. It's not even sleeping. You can see her shirt's up a little bit. Nobody batted an eye. And, when she was asked about it, of course, apparently in Iceland, this is not a huge deal, or everyone would be looking at it. I'm picturing what would happen here in the United States if someone got up to do this.
The eyes will fall out of the sockets.
Exactly. And I love her explanation, because when she was asked about it, she simply said, listen, my baby was hungry. I didn't expect to go to the pulpit, but this is kind of what I needed to do. And it really was a non-issue. So I just want to get everyone's take on this and see what you think about this. And, would this ever fly in the United States? So Priya, what do you think?
Well, I think this is pretty awesome. It's not the first time I've seen a lawmaker on the news for breastfeeding. There was another woman a while ago.
Argentina,
yes.
For Argentina.
Yeah, but I've never heard of a United States lawmaker going through the situation. But I would hope that if it happened, it would be welcomed, because they did make the law.
Right. And that's just it. Like, she wasn't trying to prove a point. She was trying to live her life. Like, she's a mom too, and her baby was hungry, and she just got up there, right? So it's just so natural. That's what I love about this. And nobody cared. Like, not in a bad way, nobody cared, but it was like, okay, yeah, it's a mom and a breastfeeding baby. Big whoop. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anybody else? Any other thoughts?
That's just wonderful. Now I know that next time I have my second child, I'm going to be making sure that I breastfeed on the New York State Assembly floor. It's just an inspiration, really.
Right.
You should.
Yes.
I know. Well, again, big props to this mama. She didn't even know probably that she was going to make headlines all around the world for it.
True.
Yeah, exactly. But I'll post it to Facebook if you guys want to check it out. But yeah, hopefully we can bring more of this to the U.S. and just normalize breastfeeding as much as possible.
Today we're talking about breastfeeding laws in the United States. Joining us today is Assemblywoman Szilagyi of New York's 22nd District and Tara Johnson of the National Conference of State Legislatures, a bipartisan organization that tracks and shares legislation for state legislators. Ladies, welcome to the Boob Group.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for being on. So are we seeing more legislation to support breastfeeding and pumping moms?
This is Tara, and I would say yes. We track this legislation, and we've been doing it for years, and we've been seeing at least a few bills considered and enacted every year. More of these are related to workplace legislation or exemption from jury duty, as many states have already had laws in place related to breastfeeding in public. Some states create laws or reiterate laws to strengthen the federal law, while others create specific unique laws for their state. We've also seen more state resolutions with language that is simply stating that they support breastfeeding and lactating moms.
And I definitely agree. Just as more women become legislators, I think we're focusing on topics that weren't really highlighted beforehand. And so I know that myself in New York, we have 3 legislators who are new mothers, and they're really highlighting and passing legislation that deals with breastfeeding and pumping.
How easy is it to pass these laws? As a woman, and you mentioned the 3 other legislators that are breastfeeding and they want these laws in place, but how easy is it to pass these laws?
As with anything, laws, bills, takes time. However, if you have a coalition of people that really believe in the topic, you can get it done. And New York State, we've passed a donor breast milk bill that was submitted in January and passed it in June. So if there's political will, if there's governmental will, it can get done.
Do you need the public support for these bills before they go out?
100%. We do need the public support, the advocacy, them going out and saying that this is a good piece of legislation that needs to get passed. And you can see that on a federal level and on a state level and even a local level. When the people are involved, legislation, laws, bills, they get done.
Is this in general for all states across the U.S.?
Yes, I would agree with that. And I think that really is the case for just about any law that you're trying to pass. Is more than one person going to a legislator and saying that they have an issue or want something passed. Going in a group and having a wide range of support certainly can help move forward any specific type of legislation.
And what about breastfeeding in public? So we've seen, news reports, we've seen images and media about women breastfeeding in public. And I know there are laws behind breastfeeding in public. So Let's talk about the different states and their laws. Can you give us an overview of these laws? It's determined by the states. Does this law protect moms who want to pump in public too?
Absolutely. So there are no laws in the United States that forbid breastfeeding outside of the home. State laws protect breastfeeding by expressly stating that a woman has the right to breastfeed in public, or by specifying the act of breastfeeding is not indecent exposure. And almost all states have laws in this area. 49 states, the District of Columbia, and the Virgin Islands have laws that specifically allow women to breastfeed in any public or private location. There are 29 states and the District of Columbia that exempt breastfeeding from public indecency laws. Some argue that those basically mean the same thing, but states like to have multiple laws in place sometimes. In terms of if it protects moms that want to pump in public as well, it's an interesting question. And from my perspective, I can't say that it does or doesn't. The language is different by state and it can be interpreted differently. So I think it would depend on the state and if there's actually a legal issue that was brought up about it.
What about the state of Idaho? I know that's the one remaining state. Can you talk to that at all?
So they don't have a law in place that specifically says they're allowed to, but they don't have a law in place that says they're not allowed to breastfeed in public. So I can't say that they have had any issues one way or the other, but they don't have a specific state law in place.
And do you think that that's because there hasn't been a public push for it, or it's coming from the legislators' point of view?
I can't say. No, I can't. Sorry.
What about you, Mickey? What do you think?
We could pass legislation till the cows come home, but it's also really a culture. We have to make sure that we're embracing breastfeeding and pumping moms. And some of these states, pumping and breastfeeding is a normal thing. Women are more likely to be home, so it's never really an issue. But in states where the cost of living is very high and, women have to have that additional income, these issues come up a lot more often. So it just all depends on, the environment of the state, the culture of the state, so forth and so on.
And what about working moms? How do these laws affect working moms that have to pump in the workplace?
Yeah, so there are quite a few pieces of legislation and laws around workplace pumping. And as many of you probably know, with the Affordable Care Act, there was a provision in the law that requires an employer to provide a reasonable break time for employees to express breast milk for her nursing child for up to a year after the child's birth. And the employer is not required necessarily to compensate an employee for that break time, but they are required to have it. The employer must also provide a place other than a bathroom for the employee to express breast milk. If the requirements impose undue hardship, is the language, an employer that employs fewer than 50 employees is not subject to the requirements. Many states have had laws in place similar to this, either before this law was passed, and some have passed after to help strengthen that law.
What about part-time employees? How does this law affect part-time employees?
So it should be the same depending on how many employees they have at that company.
So they're still allowed the break times.
They are, however, they are not compensated. They're not required to be compensated for it.
We got to change that. We need compensation.
Yeah, definitely. Because you think about the moms that, work in strenuous situations, or even teachers, part-time teachers, substitute teachers that need to pump. And they're working hard and working with the kids all day. And if they're not compensated, I wonder if they're compensated, or maybe it's up to the school. I don't know.
It's like paid family leave. In certain states, they provide compensation so that you could be with your loved one and not have to choose between a paycheck. But according to the federal law, you don't get compensation for your paid leave. So, that's something that maybe states can move forward to. Provide compensation for pumping. That'd be great, right?
Yeah, that would be awesome.
That would encourage a lot more people to, or women to pump.
And again, it is up to the employer. So I know I've heard of circumstances where it has not been an issue and employers have not necessarily counted the break time against the employee, but the law does not require them to compensate. So it really just depends on the situation.
So what about enforcing the laws? How are the laws enforced? Are they truly protecting moms? Because you hear it all the time that, maybe an employer is not educated about the laws and then the employee is not treated properly. How are these laws enforced?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I actually get phone calls quite a bit from moms. And we can't provide legal advice at my company. That's not what we do. However, we do know that enforcement depends on where you are. So if there is a city ordinance, for example, in Philadelphia, there's the Philadelphia Fair Practices Ordinance, where public accommodation in Philadelphia may not prohibit a breastfeeding mother, then someone can file a complaint to the Philadelphia Commission on Human Relations, for example, and you can find this online. And then by state, it certainly depends. Oftentimes, the Department of Public Health will know who to contact, but they're not the ones that necessarily enforce it. Related to the federal law, so the first piece of legislation law that I was talking about, the U.S. Department of Labor's Wage and Hour Division is responsible for enforcing it. So there is an ability to file a complaint to the Department of Labor. But again, in the state, it just depends on where you are in terms of who's enforcing it.
And definitely, I would document. It's so important that we first of all, we can't give legal advice. I, as a state legislator, can't give legal advice, but it's very important to document any transactions that happen, and also to just research how your state is organized. So some states you can file a complaint with the Department of Labor. Other states it's the Department of Health. So the internet is a great resource. I would just search it on your computer, type in your state or type in your town or your city, and breastfeeding rights, and you can find a lot of information that way.
There is another resource as well. The La Leche League organization sometimes has that information as well. They have regional and state sections. So sometimes we'll encourage folks to look on that webpage because they can be pretty helpful.
Awesome. So we'll definitely include that link in our resources. So it's not just about breastfeeding in public and workplace pumping. We are seeing more legislation to protect breastfeeding and pumping moms. We'll give you some highlights when we come back. Welcome back. Today we're talking about breastfeeding laws in the United States. In the first half, we talked about breastfeeding in public, and that's certainly a hot button issue. Now let's talk about other pieces of legislation that are being discussed. So the BABES Act, this just came out, and I would love to hear your take on the BABES Act. Can you tell us anything about it?
Well, this is huge. I know so many women who have interacted with TSA agents who have confiscated their breast milk. You see that celebrities, it's happened to celebrities. They're posting on their social media that their breast milk has been confiscated. So, this is a huge piece of federal legislation that just passed. President Obama signed it, which is the Bottles and Breastfeeding Equipment Screening Act, BABES Act. And so this just codifies the law, the existing TSA rules that allows breast milk, bottles, and other nursing-related items through airport security and onto planes. Yay!
Yay!
Yeah.
And it's something so small like that. It's a huge thing.
It's a victory, huge.
There's so much. So can you imagine being a mom going through and having your breast milk taken away? Like psychologically, that's like, what?
I cry when I spill my breast milk. So I can only imagine some person taking 5 bottles away from me.
Exactly. So there's also some new resources coming out about high schools providing lactation rooms. Tara, I think that it was in California, right?
That's correct. Yeah. Recently, California passed a law that requires schools operated by a school district or county office of education and charter schools to provide reasonable accommodations to a lactating pupil on high school campus. So it allows them to express breast milk, breastfeed an infant child, or address other needs related to breastfeeding.
That's awesome. And my app actually has a couple of high schools listed on there. And there was one that was recently submitted, and it was in California. I don't remember the name of it, but it was not in the state of California. So I know that this is becoming a more common thing, just from my perspective and my work. And I think it's huge that they're providing that service to students and staff.
What about for college? I was just thinking, so we're talking about high school students now, I realize that, but how is college, treated? Is that treated more like a state? Well, I guess it depends on what college, right? There's some that are state oriented and some not.
Yeah, that's a great question. And to my knowledge, that's exactly it. It depends on the college itself. Generally, colleges have more than 50 employees, so that they do fall under the federal legislation for needing to have on the campus somewhere at least a location to provide for expressing breast milk. If it's a state college, then it does fall under, being a state property, but other ones, private, do not. But then again, they generally have more than 50 employees, so they fall under the general employee law.
Most colleges and universities have lactation rooms. And again, I know this with the app. We have hundreds listed that have tons of rooms. And it's also a selling point. You want students to have that family life balance on campus. So what about, I've also heard about jury duty in Hawaii. Now, this is this is sort of like a great excuse not to go to jury duty. I'm a nursing mom, I have to feed my baby So can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Hawaii is the most recent state to pass a law related to exemption from jury duty for mothers who breastfeed or express breast milk. This varies a bit by state, but mostly it provides the exemption through a year after the birth of the child. So in Hawaii, they just passed this in, I believe it was June of 2016. It will go into effect March of 2017. And generally, pieces of legislation do take some time to actually go into effect and be enacted. It was enacted this year. It will go into effect next year just because of the process, getting the information on the forms correct so that, it's an easy process for mothers to either check the box or explain that they're breastfeeding so that they don't have to go in for jury duty. There are at least 17 states that exempt breastfeeding mothers from jury duty or allow jury duty services to be postponed. And we saw quite a bit of the legislation passed in kind of probably within the last 10 years related to this topic.
Yeah, so I have a little bit of experience with this because California, where I live, is one of the states that protects moms. And I was really shocked by this. I got something in the mail, and I'm used to, I've been a mom for a while now, so I'm used to like having hardships that I can usually get out of jury duty. Now that I'm actually not trying to, I'm actually very interested, but my life is like chaos, right? And I just can't right now. And so, but I got it in the mail, and I was going through like the reasons that you could reject jury duty or whatever. You send it in and say that you're just not available. And I was shocked to see that being a breastfeeding mom, and at the time I was a breastfeeding mom, was one of them. I'm usually saying something like, I've got little kids and I don't have childcare support or something like that, which is also very much true. That it's a financial hardship for my husband and I to be able to do that because it's just us. We live far away from family. But yeah, I was so excited about that. I'm like, well, hey, I don't even have to throw in the childcare thing. I'll just say, and it was totally true that I'm not breastfeeding one baby, but I was breastfeeding twins. So how you like them apples in your courtroom? You know what I mean? So I have some experience with that one. It totally worked too.
I did in New York State when Jaden and Ava were born. I did that. I had received jury duty notices right after their birth, and I was like, I can't. But it was hardship. It wasn't about breastfeeding. It was hardship. I can't come in because I just had a baby.
Exactly. Right. So there you go.
Okay, so there's also a mandate about lactation accommodations in airports. Assemblywoman Szilagyi, I know you've recently passed legislation based on this, correct?
Well, we were talking about just accommodations also in courtrooms and in courthouses. They lack accommodations as well. And so I passed several pieces of legislation that requires lactation accommodations in airports and also in public buildings. So Capitol buildings, courthouses, social service departments. They all should provide an area separate from the bathroom for women to express milk. And so, so it's huge. So, we're working with also New Jersey so that we can get the major airports under this jurisdiction as well, because there's a lot of airports that New York and New Jersey share. And it's also inspiring other legislators across the country to enact legislation to make accommodations in public places.
Wow. How do you feel about that? That's huge that they're that inspired that they're going to be looking at legislation that's similar to it.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, it's something that, a mom should be able to go to any state in the country and, pump or nurse their child in peace and not in the bathroom. I hear horror stories every day, and it's something that, we need to get out of our minds and our heads. No bathroom. We don't eat in the bathroom, so why should we be nursing in the bathroom?
Breast milk is a food.
Food, yeah, exactly.
It's a food.
Yes.
So talking about breast milk, donor milk. So you also worked on legislation that reimburses, I think it has to do with insurance, right?
Yeah, so we want donor breast milk is something that in New York State we established one of our first breast milk banks, so that if anyone wanted to donate breast milk, they can go to an official place in New York State and get it pasteurized and tested for any diseases or bacteria and be able to give it to preemies that are in need. And so I passed legislation to make donor breast milk reimbursable to preemies. So no matter your social economic situation, you will have access to donor breast milk, which we know is liquid gold and which is the best medicine that you can give a child.
Oh my God. And it's that for preemies, breast milk does so much for them as they're growing. So yeah.
It's been proven to get them out of the NICU unit quicker. It prevents horrible diseases. It's just the best thing that you can give to a preemie. And so we need to encourage that.
So I have a question. So how often does it actually happen that a bill or piece of legislation is introduced and then other states pick up on it? I mean, yeah, it's kind of like the ultimate compliment, but I'm just wondering, how often it actually happens.
It's like a domino effect. One person puts in a bill and then it goes across the state. So it happens frequently. And that's what collaboration's all about. I've worked with the National Conference of State Legislatures. I've gone to their conference and had conversation with other legislators, and we collaborate. We share bills. It's a common thing. It's great because we want to empower mothers all across this great union. So it's a very common thing, and it happens every day.
And what about moms? How can they support legislation?
Well, I am always happy to see people interested in government and interested in just being involved into the process. So the first thing you could do is find out who your legislator is on every level. Most people don't know who represents them. And so, find out who your legislator is, find out what legislation they talk about. And if you're interested in one of these bills, I encourage you to go out and, have them submit the bill. So call them, go to their office, go with a team and say, hey, can you sponsor this bill?
A lot of states like to make their legislation unique, but if another state has passed something first, it certainly makes it easier on them. For example, if a legislator wanted to pass a similar bill that was passed in New York, they can actually look at that language, reach out to the legislator too that was pushing that forward and get some advice. And again, the language is already being used in one state. Sometimes states will use almost the exact same language in their bills and pass that forward. So absolutely, once it's passed in one state or a handful of states, you tend to see a trend of more legislation in that area. I would also say with what we've seen with breastfeeding, that's absolutely the case.
And could it happen, too, that enough states are on board that someone's like, hey, we should make this federal law? Does that ever happen?
Not as much as you may think it would. A lot of times states like to have a state law versus a federal law, be a little more in control of it and be able to make changes if necessary. It's a lot easier if it's in state legislation versus federal legislation. So that's generally what we see.
And then if that did happen, federal law prevails over state law, right? So if there were existing laws and then a federal law came out and it was in contradiction or something, we'd have to go with the federal law. Is that correct?
Yes. However, sometimes a federal law, for example, with the Affordable Care Act and the law that says within that legislation, it actually says the federal law requirements shall not preempt a state law that provides greater protection to employees. So a lot of times state law is usually a bit tighter or more specific than federal law is.
Okay, so it just depends on how it was written, basically.
Exactly.
So Tara, how can moms listening help support legislation?
So I would say we tell anyone that we talk to about any issue, really. If you think that a law should be changed or added in your state to protect you or your community, definitely get in touch with your state representative. Their job is to listen to your concerns and to address them as best as they can. Certainly going as an individual is important, but as we talked about earlier, going with a coalition of individuals or businesses or others that feel the same way can be a very strong way to move your issue forward.
You see those surveys online and people signing the surveys. I think it's change.org. You see a lot of these surveys. How much of an impact do those surveys make on legislation? Are they taken seriously?
I think they're petitions.
They're petitions. Yeah, that's what I meant. Petitions. Are they taken seriously? Like, do legislators look at these petitions and consider them?
I have heard that some do. I don't know in terms of how much they are considered more than other ways of approaching them, and perhaps the legislator can speak to that from her experience. But I have heard anecdotally from legislators that can make a difference. Mm-hmm.
I definitely think a petition, any document that people from my community, my constituents produce is a strong document. So, the change.org is great, but sometimes people from out of the area sign it. I definitely think that if a grassroots effort is the best way to enact change in your community. And so the more people, the more of your neighbors involved, the better your cause is likely to become a legislation or law.
So get out and go door to door with your clipboard. Sign here, please. Remember me?
Or get your PTA involved, or your local dad's club.
Smart. Yeah, that's smart.
Your mommy groups. There you go, mommy groups. That's right.
So thank you so much to everyone for being part of today's show and for sharing their experience. If you're a member of the Boob Group, then be sure to check out the bonus content for this episode, where we'll discuss resources moms can use to learn more about breastfeeding and pumping legislation in their own areas.
All right, so we have a question from one of our listeners. As you know, we love to answer questions that you submit to us, either through our website or perhaps through Facebook. We try to respond to that as quickly as possible. And this one comes from Erin. This was on our Facebook page, and Erin writes, I am 37 weeks pregnant with our second baby and still breastfeeding my 26-month-old son. Boy, that's quick. Our son co-sleeps with myself and my hubby. He nursed during the night up until about 2 months ago when I decided I needed to get some better quality sleep. For the last 2 months, I nursed him when we first go to bed, but I tell him it's only for a few minutes and then it's night time. Then I will tell him, okay, it's time to go to sleep, and unlatch him. He still fusses a little bit when I unlatch, but usually only for a minute or two. And for a while, it seemed like things were going very well, but recently he has slid back a bit and will wail and wail. I don't know if he knows the new baby is coming soon and he feels insecure. We do have sleeping arrangements set up with a bassinet next to the side of the bed, and I do not plan to have baby in bed for safety reasons with a toddler. But I'm concerned about the dynamic of night nursing one child and not the other. I guess I'm looking for any advice, experiences that anyone has that can relate to this sort of thing. I'm planning on breastfeeding both toddler and newborn, but do not wish to go back to night nursing my son. Any thoughts would be helpful. Thank you, Erin.
Hi, Erin. My name's Helen. I'm one of the experts here at New Mommy Media. I'm a registered nurse and a certified lactation educator. And I want to thank you so much for your question and congratulate you on your soon-to-be-born baby, and also give you some kudos on your extended nursing for your toddler. That's wonderful. So as you move to nursing 2 babies instead of just 1, my advice is to be sure that you're clear with your language that the reason you're reducing breastfeeding for your older child is not because of the baby's needs. It's not the baby's fault, but instead it's your choice. Say things like, I need you to stop breastfeeding because mommy's tired. Or we're not going to breastfeed this morning because I need to stay hands-free for a little while. Or I'm just not ready to do that right now. So instead of saying things like, the baby needs to breastfeed first, or the baby needs more milk than you, or big boys or girls don't breastfeed like a baby does, we want to be sure that we give the idea to our child that the change is your choice. The next thing is really take it easy on yourself. It's going to be a big transition for you, and your older child may have some difficulty with the transition of having another baby now in the house for many, many reasons, not just breastfeeding. So be sure that if you want to reduce a breastfeeding session or eliminate a breastfeeding session with your older child, that you're doing that to care for yourself, and that you're dealing with your child's frustration, but you're not giving in to that. So remember that our job as a parent is to be present and to comfort, but not necessarily to breastfeed your older child at the expense of you and your baby's well-being. And be sure to find non-breastfeeding ways to connect with your older child. Hugging, snuggling, these are all really good habits that we can kind of initiate now and continue to do after the baby's born that don't involve breastfeeding. And that's about it. I want to congratulate you and wish you luck with your new baby.
That wraps up our show for today. Thanks for listening to the Boob Group. Don't forget to check out our sister show, Preggy Pals for expecting parents, Newbies for newly postpartum moms, Parent Savers for moms and dads with toddlers, and Twin Talks for parents of multiples. This is the Boob Group, where moms know breast.
This has been a New Mommy Media production. The information and material contained in this episode are presented for educational purposes only. Statements and opinions expressed in this episode are not necessarily those of New Mommy Media and should not be considered facts. While such information and materials are believed to be accurate, it is not intended to replace or substitute for professional medical advice or care, and should not be used for diagnosing or treating healthcare problem or disease or prescribing any medication. If you have questions or concerns regarding your physical or mental health or the health of your baby, please seek assistance from a qualified healthcare provider.
How would you like to have your own show on the New Mommy Media Network? We're expanding our lineup and looking for great content. If you're a business or organization interested in learning more about our co-branded podcasts, visit our website at newmommymedia.com. Hey mamas, don't forget to check out Mighty Moms. It's our online community built for new moms just like you. Not only can you connect with other moms, but you can also join us backstage for special mom-only online events. And you'll also be notified when we're recording so you can join us as a special guest. Visit our website, newmommymedia.com, and click on the Mighty Moms banner. It's free. That's newmommymedia.com. See you there.